For most people, the word propaganda conjures images of Joseph Goebbels, ranks of swastika banners, and grainy old black and white films portraying stereotypical Semitic noses and hordes of scurrying rats. And those are just the nominally educated folk who even know what the word means. Most people think of propaganda as something that used to happen in the bad old days, before our great progressive enlightenment, and fail to see that it never went away. It just rebranded itself. It's called PR now, public relations, and is deployed on society directly, but also through the subtler means of marketing and advertising, news media and entertainment. Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, who famously cracked the female tobacco market by branding cigarettes as feminist torches of freedom, said, "The conscious manipulation of the organised habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are moulded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of." Even more chillingly, he said, "If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will, without them knowing it." Cornell professor Dr. David Collum, speaking recently on James Dillingpole's podcast, said, "The average person has no idea how much they are marinating in propaganda." At the time of listening, this struck a chord with me, because I'd been ruminating on the very same idea only a few hours earlier, as I emerged from the shower and began dressing for a day in the office, and the treacly mundanity of the Today Show came seeping through the early morning calm of the apartment. My girlfriend gets up at the crack of dawn every day, and the first thing she does, without fail, is switch on Channel 9. 9 is Australia's preeminent free-to-air TV network, a glib, sparkling entity that presents itself as a trendy, friendly, middle-of-the-road liberal news and entertainment channel, whose marquee programs include the most watched news and current affairs shows in the country, and of course the most popular reality TV sensations, such as Married at First Sight, or MAFS, as it's gushingly known. Channel 9 is owned by the predictable lineup of asset management firms, including Vanguard, and in this sense is indistinguishable from any large media company the world over. They toe the standard neoliberal line on everything, stopping just short of the type of outright partisanism espoused by the likes of MSNBC and CNN. In short, Channel 9 is a mouthpiece for woke globalism, masquerading as a purveyor of balanced and reliable news and feel-good, chummy Australiana. I despise Channel 9 and most of its programming, so much so that some days it antagonises me to the point of ranting, stamping and slamming of kitchen cupboards. More than once its smug pronunciations have precipitated spats between me and my girlfriend, and during the summer of vaccine mandate marches in Melbourne, 2021 to 2022, its coverage of the protests and characterisation of myself and the other protesters as far-right extremists drove me incandescent with rage. But, like you, I have spent the past several years fine-tuning my propaganda radar. I have in fact become so proficient in detecting it that I believe I have now largely inoculated myself against even my own side's propaganda. The holy grail of objectivity. I've found that it is best to operate from the position of I don't know, and be sceptical about everything, basing one's views less on the opinions of those one is inclined to agree with, and more on the tangible, measurable events that we can observe from day to day. For instance, locking down the world to protect healthy people from a virus with a 99.98% survival rate, resulting in the biggest transfer of wealth in history from the working and middle classes to the top 1%. I don't need anyone to tell me what that was about. I can form a credible thesis on my own. But you and I are in the minority, and most people, such as my girlfriend, God bless her, do not have the capacity to filter out the bullshit. And this is largely because they marinate themselves unthinkingly in media like Channel 9's Today Show. To this end, they need our help. My girlfriend is a good case study. We'll call her Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a good example to examine because she's not actually woke. She understands on a fundamental level what's wrong with this ideology, and she adheres to a largely traditional Christian worldview. So it's fascinating and disturbing for me watching the effect the Channel 9 propaganda has on her, to say nothing of Instagram. Thank God she's not on TikTok. I think that would be a deal breaker. Being close to someone who has one foot in reality and the other stuck in the bog of corporate propaganda, the sole aim of which is to advance the goals of the World Economic Forum and the UN's Agenda 2030, is like having a friend who's in an abusive relationship. You'll see them for dinner or drinks and they'll reluctantly concede that there's a problem, and maybe even approach some kind of commitment to extracting themselves from the situation. But once they're back home with the other and comfortable in their routine, the denial starts up again. It's a constant tug of war, and ground gained one day can be swiftly retaken by the machine on the next. Perhaps you know what I mean, and have someone in your life with whom you're engaged in the same prevaricating dance. It's quite something to behold, isn't it? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Australia's far-left Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who unseated the supposedly conservative Scott Morrison in last year's general election, has been receiving fawning press coverage since his ascendance. Again, it is not quite as overt as the adulation that America's major networks lavish on the craven and demented Joe Biden. But Albanese is unremittingly framed in a positive light. I sense it viscerally, the clever way the anchors massage their language whenever speaking of him, the softball questions the reporters lob at him. It congeals and pulses and reaches out to tantalise my propaganda antennae as I pass through the living room during the short window of time each morning that Elizabeth and I have agreed she can have the TV on. It repulses me, but Elizabeth's antennae are malformed, barely existent. To this end she is ripe for the positive Albanese spin, carefully crafted for her by the producers at the Today Show. But here's the thing. Elizabeth and I have had conversations about Anthony Albanese. As recently as the election aftermath last May, I explained to her what his prime ministership heralded for Australia. I also did a video on this which I've linked in the description. And she listened objectively and ostensibly understood my logic. Having just lived through the world's longest lockdown and been outraged and disgusted by the dictatorial cavorting of the Victorian State Premier Daniel Andrews, a high-ranking Labour Party crony of Albanese, Elizabeth understood in a rudimentary layman's way that anyone cut from the same cloth as Andrews would likely be a step in the wrong direction for the federal government. Last month, Daniel Andrews went on a junket to China and forbade the Australian media, for what little it's worth, from travelling with him. Andrews' nod and wink relationship with the Chinese Communist Party is no secret, having been a hearty proponent of their Belt and Road Initiative, and the subject of much speculation regarding CCP kickbacks. And Conservative Australia was outraged at this cloak and dagger trip at the taxpayers' expense. Elizabeth raised it with me last week, expressing her dismay at Daniel Andrews' latest stunt. Then she said, "I just don't see why Anthony Albanese can't do something to rein him in." Wow. Edward Bernays would be so proud. I said to her, "Are you kidding? They're on the same team. Albanese doesn't give a damn about what Andrews does because their goals are 100% aligned, not least when it comes to the ongoing surrender of our sovereignty to the interests of the Chinese government." To this she went blank. The look someone gets when their brain has encountered an unresolvable incongruity and glitched out. That, my friends, is propaganda at work. Elizabeth had been passively soaking up the positive Albanese spin, the folksy down-home chit-chat, kindly avuncular aphorisms, the open collar shirt and the bushman's hat, all neatly packaged into 3-minute bites at regular intervals for the past 10 months. I had helped her catch a glimpse of practical reality, but she had been reprogrammed by the TV. She had been manipulated into accepting the vanilla, family-friendly construct of the Prime Minister. A likeable old chap, softly spoken, blokey, down-to-earth, and a little bit vulnerable, a pastiche that I suspect triggers emotional associations with her father. Elizabeth had defaulted to the feel-good idea of Anthony Albanese as a sensible and altruistic guy who cares about his country and would pull Daniel Andrews into line, despite her having engaged in a rational examination of the political realities of the man. Because this is the thing, the propaganda does feel good. I used to consume the daily TV news in the same way Elizabeth does, because it feels good. It's calming when you allow it to work on you the way it's intended. The jaunty jingle that precedes the grinning anchors, the soothing cadence of their voices, the clever interspersing of anxiety-producing scare stories and happy human puff pieces, the reassuring financial experts, the bright, striking supers and the familiar colour swatches, the contrived laughter and the awful jokes. It all has a coffeehouse conviviality about it, as common to our daily human existence as cornflakes and toast, and indeed, often closely associated. The daily news is a rock for people, something certain and eternal to which they can anchor themselves, a north star from which they can navigate the confusion. And it is all propaganda. I despair sometimes at the sheer volume of humanity hopelessly ensnared in this cocoon of lies and obfuscations. It feels like a losing battle. For the fact of the matter is, Elizabeth spends more time soaking up political propaganda from the TV than she does engaging in rational discourse about the same subjects with me. And the results are evident in the example I've just presented, and this is but one of many. It's not all black pills, though. I do feel like I've gained a beachhead with Elizabeth. Just the other day, her work sent out an email announcing the latest round of COVID vaccine boosters. A colleague of Elizabeth's replied to all, saying, "No vaccine for me, thanks." Elizabeth, previously the subject of 2 doses of the Moderna experimental gene therapy, proudly jumped onto the thread, replying to all with 2 simple words that gave me hope. Nor me. The propaganda is thick and unrelenting, and at times it does feel like we're losing the half-awake people in our lives to the clutches of the machine. But they need us, and our input can and does make a difference. So we must persevere. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. Please also subscribe to my Substack at jjdawson.substack.com. And if you'd like to keep in touch, please do follow me on Twitter at RealJJDawson. You can also follow me on Getter, Gab and Minds. And of course, if you enjoyed this, please do give it a like and share it about, because it really helps me out.